If you've ever looked at your blood test and felt that cold drop in your stomach, that fear that your kidneys might be slipping faster than anyone told you, then you need to hear what I'm about to say. Because there is a dangerous moment in kidney disease when things don't just get worse, they collapse. And most people never see it coming until they're sitting in a hospital room being told dialysis is their only option. My name is Dr. Johnny, and before you think this is just another health talk, stop right here because what I'm about to share may be the most urgent message you hear this year. There is a point where GFR doesn't decline gradually. It crashes. It plummets. It free falls so fast that your entire life can change in a matter of days. And that's exactly what happened to a 57-year-old man whose story shocked even me after 20 years in medicine. He went from living his normal life to a GFR of 4. 4. That's the edge of the cliff, the moment where your kidneys are no longer filtering enough blood to keep your body alive without machines. And if you're thinking, that could never happen to me, I need you to understand something. He thought the same thing. Right up until the day his doctors rolled a dialysis machine into his room and told him it was time. But here's why I need you to stay with me. Because instead of starting lifelong dialysis, something extraordinary happened. Something I still struggle to describe without shaking my head. In just 20 days, his GFR didn't just stabilize. It shot from 4 all the way to 47. Yes, 47. And this wasn't a rumor or a miracle story online. This was documented, verified, and published in a peer-reviewed medical journal. And the reason I'm telling you this right now is simple. If a man on the brink of dialysis could recover kidney function, that dramatically, then what does that mean for you? What possibilities have you never been told? What doors were closed on you far too early? So before we go any deeper, take a breath, because the next few minutes may challenge everything you thought you knew about kidney failure. And as you'll see in just a moment, the truth behind his recovery isn't magic. It isn't hype. It's something far more powerful and far more overlooked than anyone expects. When I first met him, he didn't look like someone whose kidneys were failing. He looked like someone who had been ambushed by his own body. Pale skin, heavy breathing, eyes that told me he hadn't slept in days. And more than anything, he looked terrified. Not of dying, but of losing control. He told me, Dr. Johnny, I did everything they told me to do. How did it still get this bad? And that question hit me harder than any lab result because I knew exactly what he meant. Kidney failure doesn't announce itself gently. It doesn't slow down to give you time to prepare. Sometimes it collapses in a way that even experienced doctors struggle to predict. And that's exactly what happened to him. His GFR didn't drift downward, it dropped off a cliff, from 14 to 4 in a single week. A fall that severe is like the kidneys sending a final distress call before shutting down. Now, scientifically, a GFR of 4 isn't just low. It means the kidneys are filtering less than 5 milliliters of blood per minute, barely enough to keep toxins from overwhelming the bloodstream. At that level, the body is drowning in what it cannot remove: potassium, acids, nitrogen waste. Every organ has to fight to stay online. The heart struggles, the brain slows, the muscles weaken. And for him, the crash triggered something even more dangerous: severe metabolic acidosis. His blood had turned so acidic that every heartbeat felt like it was pushing against fire. Most patients in this condition don't walk into a hospital, they're carried. And as if that wasn't enough, the first dialysis machine brought into his room had to be cleaned immediately after one session because the toxin load was so extreme. That's not something you see every day. That's something you see when a body is seconds away from losing the battle. What struck me most, though, wasn't just the numbers. It was the way he kept asking, how did this happen so fast? And the truth is painful. Many kidney patients go through the exact same free fall without ever realizing how close they are to the edge. Because kidney decline isn't always slow. Sometimes it accelerates, triggered by one hidden metabolic stressor, one medication mismatch, or one dietary mistake that shifts everything. And this is why I need you to stay with me. Because if his GFR could crash this violently without warning, then understanding why is not just important, it might be the very thing that protects you or someone you love. But knowing how he reached the edge is only half the story. Because something else, something far more surprising, was waiting on the other side of his collapse. And that part is what most people never hear about. But just understanding how his kidneys crashed isn't enough. Because what happened next revealed an even more dangerous trigger, one that thousands of people overlook every single day. When I first met him, he didn't look like someone whose kidneys were failing. He looked like someone who had been ambushed by his own body. Pale skin, heavy breathing, eyes filled with the kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from staying up late, but from fighting a war inside your own bloodstream. And more than anything, he looked terrified, not of dying, but of losing control. He looked at me and said, "Dr. Johnny, I did everything they told me to do. How did it still get this bad?" And that question always hits deeper than any lab number because kidney failure doesn't creep in politely. It doesn't tap you on the shoulder. It breaks the door down. And that's exactly what happened to him. His GFR didn't slowly decline, it collapsed, free-falling from 14 to 4 in a single week. That kind of drop isn't a warning sign. It's a medical scream for help. To understand how extreme that is, imagine this: a GFR of 4 means your kidneys are filtering less than 5 milliliters of blood per minute. That's barely enough to keep toxins from suffocating your organs. Acid builds up, potassium spikes, nitrogen waste floods the bloodstream. The heart strains, the brain fogs, the muscles burn with weakness. And in his case, it triggered severe metabolic acidosis, a state where the blood becomes so acidic that every heartbeat feels like pushing against fire. It got so bad that after his very first dialysis session, the machine had to be cleaned immediately because of how much waste it pulled from his blood. That isn't routine. That's a sign that the body was standing on the final inch before the cliff. But what haunted me was the way he kept repeating, "How did this happen so fast?" And the truth is, brutal, many kidney patients experience the same sudden crash without warning, because kidney decline isn't always slow. Sometimes a single metabolic trigger, a medication mismatch, or even one overlooked dietary factor can accelerate the fall overnight. And this is exactly why I need you to hear the next part, because if his kidneys could collapse this violently, understanding why may be the thing that protects you or someone you love. But knowing how he reached the edge is only the beginning, because what happened after the fall, that was the part no one, not even his medical team, expected. And yet understanding this dramatic crash still doesn't reveal the most dangerous part of his story, because there was another hidden factor far more alarming, quietly pushing his kidneys toward failure without him ever realizing it. What shook me most about his situation wasn't only the crash, it was the fact that he genuinely believed he had been following a kidney-friendly lifestyle. And that's where the second, deeper layer of this story begins. Because like so many people with CKD, he'd been absorbing health advice from everywhere: relatives, Facebook groups, old diet pamphlets, and even well-meaning friends who never understood how fragile kidney metabolism really is. And as he sat across from me describing his routine low-carb meals, heavy protein days, skipping fruit because he thought it was too sugary, I realized he had unknowingly walked straight into the very trap that accelerates kidney decline. You see, one of the biggest myths circulating online, especially in the last few years, is the idea that diets like keto carnivore or high-protein reset diets are somehow good for kidney repair. These diets get pushed as miracle cures for everything from diabetes to inflammation. But for late-stage CKD, they're not just ineffective, they're dangerous. When your kidneys are already struggling, throwing large amounts of animal protein and fat into the system is like asking a tired horse to sprint uphill with a load twice its weight. The metabolic byproducts, sulfates, phosphates, uric acid, nitrogen waste, rise sharply. And because filtration is limited, they accumulate faster than the body can process. In his case, he proudly told me he was eating almost no fruit and lots of meat because he believed sugar was the enemy and protein was the cure. But scientifically, this pushed him in the opposite direction. Studies show that high-protein diets increase kidney glomerular pressure, leading to faster GFR decline. In patients with stage 4 or 5 CKD, this can accelerate damage at a rate that feels invisible until it suddenly isn't, until the drop becomes a plunge, just like what he experienced. And the saddest part is that he tried so hard to do the right thing. He wasn't careless, he was misinformed. What he didn't know, and what so many people are never told, is that no clinical trial in medical literature has ever shown keto or carnivore reversing late-stage CKD. Not one. Instead, these diets consistently increase metabolic acid load, exactly what pushed him into the severe metabolic acidosis that nearly ended his kidney function altogether. And as he listened to me explain this, I could see the pain in his eyes, not just from being sick, but from realizing he had been fighting the wrong battle with the wrong weapons. That was the moment I told him something most patients never hear. It's not about eating less or more. It's about eating what your kidneys can process with the least metabolic cost. And that truth became the foundation of the turnaround that would come only days later. But understanding the dietary trap he fell into still isn't the full story, because hidden beneath his food choices was another factor. One far more dangerous, and one that thousands of kidney patients overlook every single day, often without anyone warning them. But knowing this still isn't enough, because there's an even more dangerous factor you need to hear next. What he didn't realize, and what many kidney patients never discover until it's almost too late, is that diet wasn't the only force dragging him toward dialysis. There was something far more subtle, something hiding in plain sight, something he took every single morning without a second thought. And when we finally uncovered it, everything suddenly made sense. Because beneath the dramatic crash of his GFR, beneath the metabolic chaos and the acidosis, there was one medication silently draining the last strength his kidneys had left. As I reviewed his chart, I saw it immediately: a high-dose loop diuretic torsemide. Now, torsemide isn't a bad medication. In fact, for certain heart failure patients, it's life-saving. But here's the part most people never hear in late-stage CKD, especially when metabolic acidosis is present. Loop diuretics can push the kidneys past their breaking point. They pull water out of the body at high speed, and when the kidneys are already struggling, that sudden dehydration reduces renal blood flow sharply. Less blood reaching the kidneys means less filtration. Less filtration means toxins stack up even faster. And in a body already overwhelmed by acid, this creates the perfect storm for a GFR collapse. When I explained this to him, he stared at me with disbelief. "You mean the medicine that was supposed to help me made me worse, and it wasn't his fault for not knowing?" Most patients aren't told how fragile the kidney-heart balance is. They don't know that studies show loop diuretics, especially at high doses, can trigger up to a 20–30% reduction in renal perfusion within hours. They don't know that in patients with CKD stage 4–5, these medications can tip the system from barely coping to system overload. And in his case, that's exactly what happened. The torsemide wasn't just removing excess fluid, it was stripping his kidneys of the hydration and circulation they desperately needed to stay alive. Once his medical team paused, his numbers didn't magically fix themselves, but the free fall stopped. It created just enough breathing room for the real recovery to begin. But understanding this medication trap is still just another piece of the puzzle, because stopping the damage is only half the battle. The real turning point came from something far more unexpected, something he started putting into his body, not taking out of it. But knowing this still isn't enough, because the next factor was the one that truly changed everything. What happened next was something I wish more kidney patients could witness, because this is where his story shifts from collapse to possibility. Once the medication overload was taken off his shoulders, his medical team had to choose a path, one that most hospitals never dare to take. And the choice they made became the turning point that gave him a second chance. Instead of relying on aggressive long-term dialysis, they focused on what his body could still do if given the right conditions: recover, repair, and rebalance. And the tool they used wasn't a new drug or a complicated machine, but something far simpler and far more powerful. It all began with a defined raw plant-based diet, a nutritional protocol that doesn't hide behind trends or fads, but works because it reduces the metabolic burden almost instantly. When he first heard the word raw, he hesitated. He told me, "Dr. Johnny, you're saying vegetables are going to fix GFR." And I explained gently that it wasn't about vegetables versus medicine. It was about giving his kidneys the lowest workload possible so they could finally stop drowning and start breathing. The science behind this is surprisingly straightforward. Raw plant foods are inherently low acid, high fiber, and rich in potassium in a form that is slowly absorbed, allowing the body to regulate it safely. They contain enzymes that help digestion without demanding extra effort from the kidneys. And the most important part, they don't create the metabolic waste that animal protein produces. No uric acid, no nitrogen overload, no sulfur compounds. Instead, foods like leafy greens, orange vegetables, berries, tomatoes, and avocados deliver antioxidants that protect kidney cells from oxidative stress. His team instructed him to increase fruit intake dramatically, nearly 10 times what he was eating before. And while that would terrify some CKD patients, the truth is that whole fruits digest differently from processed sugars. Studies show that whole fruit consumption can improve endothelial function, reduce inflammation, and stabilize blood pressure, all critical for kidney recovery. And for him, this shift created a ripple effect through his entire system. Within days, his metabolic acidosis began to ease. His energy returned, his appetite stabilized, his mood lifted. The difference was visible not just in lab results, but in the light coming back into his face. But the most surprising part wasn't the fruit, it was a very specific combination. His doctors emphasized avocado paired with tomatoes. The healthy fats in avocado increased lycopene absorption by up to 400%, turning a simple meal into a potent anti-inflammatory shield. This pairing became a daily ritual for him, and it played a significant role in reducing oxidative pressure on his kidneys. Yet even this transformation, as powerful as it was, still doesn't reveal the full story behind his recovery. Because there was another layer to this nutritional approach that most people completely overlook, one that amplified everything he was doing and accelerated the turnaround in a way that stunned the entire team. But knowing this still isn't enough, because what happens next reveals an even more surprising factor that pushed his recovery into motion. What most people don't realize is that the power of this diet didn't come only from what he ate, but from how he ate it. Because his medical team didn't just give him a list of foods, they gave him a strategy designed to lower metabolic stress with every bite. And this is the part that truly caught my attention, because it's something almost no kidney patient ever thinks about: the raw nature of the foods themselves. You see, when you cook food, boil it, saute it, roast it, you destroy certain enzymes that naturally support digestion. And for healthy people, that's fine. But when the kidneys are failing, every bit of digestion becomes a negotiation. How much acid will this meal produce? How hard will the liver and kidneys have to work to neutralize it? How many waste products will be created along the way? Raw foods change that equation completely. They reduce digestive burden, decrease acid load, and deliver nutrients in their most intact form. The moment he switched to raw meals, the metabolic noise inside his body began to quiet down. His blood tests reflected it. His inflammation markers dropped. His acid levels started moving back toward normal. And he told me, for the first time in months, I feel like my body isn't fighting me. That may sound simple, but in late-stage CKD, that feeling is priceless. And there was another unexpected benefit: hydration. Raw fruits and vegetables are naturally water-rich. Water inside whole foods absorbs more slowly, keeping the body hydrated in a way plain water often cannot. This helped relieve pressure on his kidneys and improved renal blood flow, a critical part of reversing acidosis. Science supports this more than people realize. Studies show that plant-rich raw diets can reduce oxidative stress, improve endothelial function, and even lower blood pressure without medication changes. And in his case, these effects weren't theoretical, they were visible. His skin tone improved, his breathing steadied, his appetite returned. He even regained the ability to walk longer distances without fatigue. But there was one more layer, one that magnified everything he was doing. His team didn't simply tell him to eat raw. They guided him to focus on specific groups: dark leafy greens to alkalize the blood, deep yellow vegetables for carotenoids, and fruits like berries and grapes for antioxidant support. This wasn't a random collection of foods, it was a therapeutic protocol. And yet, even with all these nutritional breakthroughs, the real shock came from something else entirely. Something simple, almost hidden, but powerful enough to shift his GFR faster than anyone expected. But knowing this still isn't enough, because what comes next uncovers a deeper mechanism behind his recovery that most people never hear about. What truly amplified everything he was doing wasn't just the diet or the hydration, it was the precision of the foods chosen for his recovery. Because his team didn't simply tell him to eat plants or eat clean. They told him to prioritize a group of foods that many people overlook, yet they carry some of the most powerful regenerative properties for the kidneys. And this is where his recovery began to accelerate faster than any of us expected: dark leafy greens and deep yellow vegetables. Now, most people think of leafy greens as just healthy or good for vitamins. But for someone with metabolic acidosis, the very condition that nearly ended his kidney function. These greens become a lifeline. Spinach, kale, collard, greens, beet greens. They all share one critical trait: they are deeply alkalizing. They neutralize excess acid in the bloodstream, naturally giving the kidneys space to breathe instead of suffocating under metabolic overload. When he started eating these greens raw, something remarkable happened. His acid levels, once dangerously high, began to stabilize. His bicarbonate levels improved. And for the first time since his collapse, his kidneys were no longer fighting a battle they were destined to lose. He described it perfectly. It feels like someone finally turned the fire down. And scientifically, that's exactly what alkalizing foods do. They cool the internal environment, giving the kidneys the relief they've been desperately needing. But the greens weren't working alone. His team added another group: deep yellow vegetables like carrot, squash, pumpkin, and yellow peppers. Their bright color comes from carotenoids, powerful antioxidants that reduce oxidative stress and inflammation inside the kidney tissues. This matters because oxidative stress is one of the main drivers of kidney deterioration at advanced stages. These vegetables help protect his nephrons from further damage, while the rest of the protocol created the environment needed for recovery. Within days of emphasizing these foods, his labs reflected the change. His inflammatory markers fell, his acid levels corrected, his energy rose, and slowly, almost quietly, his kidney function began to return. And yet, with all this progress, we still weren't at the heart of the transformation. Because behind the scenes, another factor, deceptively simple, was playing a crucial role in turning his numbers around. Something he wasn't eating, but something he had stopped eating altogether. But knowing this still isn't enough, because the next factor reveals the kind of dietary mistake that pushes thousands toward dialysis without ever realizing it. What truly surprised him, and honestly surprised many of my own patients when I share this, is that a big part of his recovery didn't come from adding more food, but from removing one thing almost everyone believes is harmless. His medical team instructed him to eliminate all added oils, not reduce them, not switch from one type to another, completely remove them. And to him, this felt strange. He had always heard that olive oil was heart healthy, that seed oils were fine in moderation, and that butter alternatives were better than the real thing. But when your kidneys are failing, even the healthiest oils can become a hidden enemy. The science behind this is clear: added oils, even the so-called good ones, are dense, highly concentrated fats that slow circulation, reduce insulin sensitivity, and increase the metabolic workload on both the liver and kidneys. And remember, his kidneys were already barely functioning. They needed every bit of metabolic relief they could get. When oils enter the bloodstream, they alter the thickness of the blood for hours, making it harder for the kidneys to filter efficiently. For a healthy person, the body compensates. For someone at GFR 4, it's like adding weights to a drowning swimmer. But the moment he removed oils completely, something shifted. His insulin requirement decreased. His energy became more stable. His fluid retention improved. And the inflammation markers in his labs began to fall. He told me, "I never thought something as small as oil could make such a difference." But that's the thing. When the kidneys are fragile, the smallest metabolic stressors can have the biggest impact. Instead of oils, all his fats came from whole foods, avocados, seeds, nuts in tiny portions, and naturally occurring fats in fruits. These forms of fat are packed inside fiber and water, allowing the body to absorb them slowly without overwhelming the kidneys. It's the difference between sipping water calmly and being hit by a fire hose. And while eliminating oils was a major step, there was one more adjustment that supercharged everything he was doing, one that many people never consider, because it sounds too simple to matter. But for him, it became a silent catalyst that helped his kidneys regain their rhythm. But knowing this still isn't enough, because the next factor was the one that accelerated his recovery in a way no one, including his doctors, saw coming. What came next is one of the most overlooked but powerful aspects of his entire recovery. Every single thing he ate was raw. No steaming, no roasting, no sautéing, no boiling. Just whole, unprocessed living foods exactly as they grow in nature. And to most people, that sounds extreme. But for someone whose kidneys were hanging on by a thread, it became the very thing that reduced enough metabolic noise for the body to finally stabilize. When he first heard the instructions, he thought raw, as in nothing cooked at all, and his doctors nodded. Because here's what almost no one realizes: cooking changes food chemistry. Heating breaks down enzymes, increases acid formation, destroys delicate phytonutrients, and produces metabolic waste that the kidneys must filter. Again, that's easy for healthy kidneys. But for someone at stage 5, CKD, every cooked meal demands more energy than the body can afford to spend. The moment he switched to raw foods only, something remarkable began to happen. His digestion became lighter, not sluggish, not painful, not bloated. His acid levels dropped. He described it like this: "It's the first time in months I've eaten without feeling like my body is paying a price afterward." And that's not just a feeling, science backs this up. Studies show that raw plant foods produce significantly lower renal acid load, reduce inflammation, improve detoxification pathways, and preserve antioxidants that cooking destroys. One unexpected benefit was how hydrated he became. Raw fruits and vegetables carry what researchers call structured water, encased in natural fibers, that enters the bloodstream slowly and efficiently. It's one of the most kidney-friendly forms of hydration on Earth. Instead of chugging water that flushes through too fast, his cells absorbed hydration, gradually keeping his kidneys supported without overwhelming them. His lab results reflected it. His urine output stabilized, his acid levels corrected faster, and his GFR began rising in a way that was impossible to ignore. His medical team documented every shift because cases like this simply don't happen in late-stage CKD unless the body receives exactly what it needs at exactly the right moment. But even with all these dramatic improvements, there was still one more layer to the story, one that determined whether his recovery would hold or collapse. Because while diet and hydration saved him, understanding the final trigger was the key to preventing thousands of others from repeating his near-fatal mistake. But knowing this still isn't enough, because the next factor reveals the most overlooked threat in late-stage kidney disease, one that could determine whether someone avoids dialysis or ends up on it permanently. If you've made it this far, I want you to hear this clearly: you are not powerless. No matter what your last lab test said, no matter what stage you've been told you're in, and no matter how overwhelmed you may feel, your story is not over. I've seen kidneys bounce back in ways that defy the odds. And this case is living proof that your body can surprise you when you give it the right conditions to heal. So please don't walk away from this video feeling afraid. Walk away feeling informed, supported, and a little more hopeful than before. And if this message helped you save this video so you can come back to it whenever you need clarity or encouragement, I promise you having the right information at the right moment can change everything. And make sure you subscribe to this channel, because I'm here every week sharing the newest medical insights, kidney-safe foods, early warning signs, and real strategies that can protect your kidneys for years to come. Your health deserves knowledge that's clear, trustworthy, and explained in a way that actually makes sense. So hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss what could be the video that helps you the most. And before we end, I want you to hold on to this. Even in the hardest moments, there is always something you can do. There is always one more choice you can make. There is always one small change that can move your body toward healing instead of decline. If a man with a GFR of 4 can rise to 47 in 20 days, who's to say what your body's capable of? Take care of yourself, stay hopeful, and remember, I'm right here with you on this journey.